Today, we'll tell you the story of a man whose legend rivals Pablo Escobar, a name synonymous with drug trafficking. At a time when law enforcement was dedicating resources to crack down on the drug business, he built one of the most successful drug cartels in modern times. His reach extended to 5 continents and over 50 countries. He single-handedly sent more drugs into the United States than any other drug lord. His fame reached new heights when he succeeded in escaping not 1 but 2 maximum security prisons as if they were nothing. He became the drug lord with the heftiest price tag until he was sent off to a supermax prison where he would live out the rest of his days, or so it seems. This man is El Chapo, and here's what you need to know about one of the most powerful drug lords in the world. First, the basics. His real name is Joaquin Guzman, and he was practically born into a life of crime. From the city of Sinaloa, he learned the ropes and gradually climbed his way to the top of the food chain by working for other drug lords. Because of his 5'6" height and stocky build, he was called El Chapo, or Shorty. But his height wasn't enough to keep him grounded to the floor. By 1988, he founded the Sinaloa Cartel and started distributing drugs to the United States and Europe through creative methods. He would hide drugs in chili pepper cans, fire extinguishers, and go as far as catapulting drugs over the border. His experience serving under other drug lords paid off as his leadership of the cartel resulted in immense wealth, power, and influence. This was enough for Forbes to rank him as one of the most powerful people in the world between 2009 and 2013. The Drug Enforcement Administration also stated that he matched the wealth and influence of Pablo Escobar, and then some. If you know anything about drug lords and the drug trafficking business, then you know that this is a pretty huge statement. But his fame and popularity in the underworld was his undoing. In 1993, the hands of the law finally caught up to him when he was arrested in Guatemala and sent to a maximum security prison called Puente Grande, where he was expected to serve 20 years. The key word here is expected. During his time in prison, El Chapo did what all businessmen do. He worked the odds in his favor. He endeared himself to the prison officials, the guards, and everyone who could be of service to him. After all, he had unlimited resources at his disposal to buy their loyalty or at least threaten them into submission if money wasn't their language. From within this maximum security prison, he lived like a king with access to good food and women. From his cell, he still had as much influence in his cartel as he did on the outside, with enough power to hold board meetings if he wanted to. However, things took a turn for the worst for El Chapo pretty quickly. The Mexican government came to an agreement with the United States, which allowed drug lords like El Chapo to be extradited to the US as long as they didn't get the death penalty. Serving their sentence in a US maximum prison was the worst nightmare for most drug lords. Why? Because they wouldn't have the same freedom they did in a Mexican prison, and it would be harder to control their business when they are locked far away from their base of operations. El Chapo had spent 8 years behind bars at this time, and in January 2001, he broke out of prison in the simplest way ever. With the help of some corrupt officials, he was wheeled out of prison in a laundry cart, but many believe he simply walked out of prison in a police uniform. For the next decade, he evaded the hands of justice and spent his time consolidating his power. He always seemed to be one step ahead of both his competitors and his would-be captors. But after 13 years of dodging and running, he was eventually arrested by Mexican Marines in February 2014. This time around, the Mexican government was reluctant to extradite him to the US and wanted him to face the full force of the law in a Mexican prison. For his second prison, he was taken to the Altiplano prison, or Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1. This prison was incredibly secure, and it looked like there was no possible means of escape. The cells were without windows, and the inmates were not allowed to talk to one another. The only money he had access to was $48 every month to buy personal hygiene products. Because of his notoriety, Guzman was kept in his cell for 23 hours a day, with 1 hour of outdoor time. Family members were also unwelcomed and could only visit if approved by a judge. The conditions in this prison were harsh and unpleasant, but not enough to stop El Chapo from pulling off his second legendary escape. And this was something straight out of a movie. On the 11th of January 2015, he rode his way to freedom through a tunnel that was constructed directly under his shower area. Little did the government know that El Chapo's men, led by his wife, used a housing construction project in the Santa Juanita neighborhood to secretly construct a high-quality tunnel to smuggle the drug lord to freedom. The only thing missing from the tunnel was an air conditioner, as it was fitted with air ducts, artificial lighting, and enough materials to keep it safe. His second escape triggered a manhunt like you've never seen, and all measures were put in place to apprehend the criminal. The prison was put on lockdown and the search was extended to several parts of Mexico. Despite the resources that were dedicated to capturing him, there was no denying that El Chapo pulled an escape for the ages. His second escape from the most secure prison in Mexico was an affront to the government, and there was no way they were going to take it lying down. Capturing El Chapo became the #1 priority of the government, and huge rewards were placed on his head for any information that could lead to his arrest. With the increased attention on him, El Chapo changed hideouts all the time, and there were a few occasions where authorities came close to capturing him once again. Now that the United States and Mexico had joined forces, Guzman's freedom was short-lived, and he was captured less than a year after his escape in January 2016. This time around, no time was wasted in sending him straight to the United States, and he was handed over to the HIS and DEA. While facing the 17-count indictment in the United States District Court in New York, he was kept in the maximum security wing of the Metropolitan Correctional Center and was heavily guarded at all times. Of course, he pleaded not guilty to the charges brought against him, but no one was going to let him get away with his crimes. He was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 30 years on the 17th of July 2019. Now, he is imprisoned in the most secure prison in the U.S., the ADX Florence, a supermax prison built for criminals just like El Chapo. For a man who has pulled off some daring escapes, he has no hope of getting out of here alive and will most likely live out the rest of his days in confinement. Which of El Chapo's legendary escapes shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments.